There is currently a strike on. It's been organised by RMT. This is the union that backs the transport sector, and it is in London at the moment, where the kind of the London Underground is going to be striking. And they the prescription they are given is will strike to defend jobs, conditions, and pensions. It's the largest rail strike in an incredibly long time. There's lots of discourse going on about it because, as you will understand, the right wing are pretty frustrated by it. And us lefties, who understand the union is what protects the worker against the corporation, yeah, we're pretty happy with more strike action. Strike action is going everywhere in the United States. There's huge amounts of strike action going on in the United States right now. More people are unionizing, which is really great to see. And I didn't think we'd seen too much of it over in the United Kingdom, but at least we're seeing something happen now. Now, this is there is a leaflet they've just put out about why they're striking. Let's have a quick look at that so we understand the reasons for the strike and why they decided that you need to have to strike, especially considering that they were all the people who were working in the transport sector. They were all working the entirety of the way through the pandemic. Weren't given pay rises, and now they're facing a bunch of extra stuff from TfL to make their jobs harder. So that's why they're striking. Let's have a look. Let's have a look. London Underground staff are striking to stop job cuts, to defend conditions, and to protect our pensions. Now, obviously, inflation is pretty high, so a pay rise will almost certainly be included in this as well. Tube workers have worked throughout the pandemic to keep an essential service running. Now, our employer wants to make us pay for our financial crisis we didn't create with cuts to jobs, conditions, including pensions. They want to cut 600 frontline positions from tube stations, losing 26 jobs in King's Cross alone. Apparently, TfL needs to make £500 million of cuts every year to be self-financing. And TfL relies on fares for 70% of its regular revenue. By comparison, only 38% of the New York subway's revenue comes from fares. Very, very interesting. In 2018, the Tories abolished TfL's funding. When fare revenue collapsed during the pandemic, short-term bailouts came with multiple conditions. These included insisting TfL identity job cuts, review working arrangements, and review our pension scheme. Sadly, bosses have complied with the Tories' demands. Interesting, I was not aware of the fact that additional TfL funding was provided by the government to keep that running, and then it was supposed to be entirely self-financing after those were removed. I was unaware of this, so, the more you know. I'm not an RMT member, so I guess I wouldn't have been exactly clued in. I am a CW member, as my little thing in the top left will show you. Imagine your experience as a passionate with 600 fewer station staff. Although LU says it will manage cuts via deleting vacancies rather than compulsory redundancies, this will still mean a reduction of over 10% in the total station's workforce. To give just one example, Victoria currently has 91 full-time customer service attendants. Under LU's proposals, we'll just have 64. This will make the tube less accessible and less safe, especially for disabled passengers. LU plans to cut platform duties, meaning staff won't be on the spot to manage congestion and respond to incidences. If these cuts go ahead, other cuts will likely follow, along with possible service cuts, meaning trains will be less frequent. So not only is this going to impact people's conditions in which they have to deal with, people are going to be harder, overworked by having to deal with more on their own, whereas otherwise would be covered by other staff. It's also going to make things less safe, as passengers are going to have fewer staff available to deal with any issues that arise. It's also going to lead to, in general, a worse customer experiences as services are cut, and people's ability to engage with the service at point of sale is also going to be stymied somewhat by those job cuts too, right? LU's imposition of new agreements which seek to maximise flexibility and give more power to change our shift times and locations will lead to increased staff fatigue, which will have a knock-on effect on passenger safety. TfL is also reviewing the pension scheme. We have a good final salary pension scheme in an excellent financial condition. TfL wants to reduce the cost of the pension scheme as part of our drive for cuts. We do not accept we should pay for the funding gap cuts via our pensions. I'm assuming they're going to be changing the final salary scheme down to a defined contribution scheme rather, which is the shitty pension that millennials have now, which boomers managed to get hold of, which is saddening, but it is what it is. We want our employer to abandon planned cuts. We want Mayor Khan to join us in demanding adequate funding from the government. Currently, the funding gap is around $2 billion per year. During the pandemic, the number of billionaires in Britain has increased to a record high. Their wealth has increased by 21.7%. Rather than forcing workers to pay, we believe this money should be taxed to fund services such as public transport. True and based. We absolutely should be taxing the rich to pay for more essential services. We know our strikes cause inconvenience. This is an inevitable consequence of transport workers withdrawing our labour. But if TfL and LU cuts go ahead, passengers will face a de-staffed service and the possibility of what Sadiq Khan has called managed decline. This will cause far greater inconvenience in the long run, which is also true, right? People may have to deal with the issues with regards to what happens when the labour is withdrawn and the way in which there are going to be no services and they have to make different arrangements to be able to get around, right? This is what happens when an essential service gets shut down and the people who work there aren't treated with due respect and use their organising power to be able to bargain for better pay and conditions, which is entirely reasonable, right? You say, oh, well, they're just holding the town to ransom. I'm like, well, good. If the TFL didn't plan on cuts, didn't plan on raiding the pension scheme, they wouldn't be forced into the position of having to strike. So if people are being frustrated by the fact that their day in London is being their ability to travel in London is being curtailed by the strikes they're engaging in, they only have one group to blame, and it's not the union. The group to blame is going to be TfL at the end of the day, right? Because if they'd not engaged in this stuff, then the retaliatory action by the unions would never have taken place in the first place. We urge you to support our strikes. If you're facing attacks on terms and conditions in your own workplace, we urge you to organise virus trade union and fight back. You can count on the support of the RMT. True and based. Excellent. This is good. As I said, these are necessary to defend the pay and conditions of the people who work on the railways, right? If you're a person who comes back and says to this, oh, well, I don't earn as much as a train driver, yeah, you don't see me going on strike, and I'm like, maybe there's some cause and effect to that. Maybe if you joined a union, maybe if you'd actually gone on strike, you'd be in the position to bargain for better pay and for better pay conditions yourself. If you're saying, well, these unionised people earn so much more than I do, maybe that's a sign that you need to join a fucking union. And like, second of all, that doesn't mean that the job cuts that are happening at the moment aren't going to affect the overall service of the line. It also doesn't mean that everyone who is a member of the union is a train driver who earns the salaries that you're getting frustrated by. There are plenty of people who work in the service industry within TfL who earn like 20k, and they absolutely deserve a pay rise. I would say more so than the people who drive the trains, right? There's a service-wide strike. These members of the service industry who work in the London Underground, these are also members of the union, and they also deserve to be able to fight for their pay and conditions, absolutely. And these aren't the people who you are getting frustrated by because they earn so much from being in a union, right? And, say, well, now these people on the bottom rung of that, they're going to get a pay rise as well because they're in a union. This is the sign that you should go out and join. It says in the document that we've just looked at that the RMT would count on you can count on the support of the RMT to back the strike that you would engage in with the union for your basic sector as well. It's very, very simple. If you want to be able to have access to the bargaining power that members of RMT do, you know what you need to fucking do? You need to go out and join a union and be able to leverage your power as a worker in the way that they're doing. Very, very simple. Everyone has the ability to join a trade union. It's protected by law. Go out and fucking do it. Why don't you join a trade union right now? Go and do it. Join a fucking union right now. I'm ordering you to do it. Do not subscribe to No Justice MTG on Twitch. Spend that money on a union membership, and then once you've done that, you can then come back and subscribe to me on Twitch, right? You should just go and do it, right? If you're on low pay, you can get a reduced membership, membership for a student, even further reduced membership. Students can join Unite from like £2 a month. It's dirt cheap. Do it, join it, get involved. Come out on the 18th of June, where there's going to be a march for, a new deal for workers for better paying conditions for everybody as well. We can all come out, members of a union or not. This is going to be something that the TUC is supporting. You need to come out, join us on the 18th of June to speak for the need with which the government needs to act to make life better in the cost of living crisis. If you want to be able to affect change that benefits you, you're going to have to make your voice heard, whether that's by marching, whether that's by protesting, engaging in civil disobedience, or by joining a union and striking at workplace. These are all things that you can do to make your life better. Don't get mad at the people who disrupt life by doing that, because it's the reason that they're doing that they actually have the increase in pay and conditions that they're fighting for. It's very, very simple. If you believe in the bargaining power of the collective bargaining power of working people in this country, you absolutely should support this strike 100%. Speaking of people who are supposed to fight for the needs of working people coming out and supporting the strike, there's been a weird absence of a certain political party leader. Definitely not a political party leader whose entire salary is paid for by the unions who contribute to the party who he's supposed to represent, is not explicitly coming out and supporting the strikes. Would you not believe that Starmer's spokesperson saying that the strike should not go ahead, and saying they're clear the position that they shouldn't go ahead, and that nobody wants to see industrial action that's disruptive? It's incredible to me that a man whose bills are literally paid by the party contributions by the RMT is not coming out in support of the strikes. You are the Labour Party. This is the Labour movement. It is your job to fight for workers. It is your job to support strike action. It is your job to be there in Parliament and fight for these things and the ability of people to be able to campaign for better wages. You were out there not 2 months ago talking about how every worker needs a union, and now the unions are actually engaging in the industrial action that they need to do to secure their future as workers, and suddenly, we can't be supporting a strike as the Labour fucking leader. What an embarrassment he is. What a fucking charlatan he is to call himself the leader of the Labour Party and not come out in support of these strikes. It's a damning indictment on the state of the fucking Labour Party right now that we have to have, that literally we're having members of the Labour front bench having to come out in support of strikes. It is news. It is a news story that the Shadow Levelling Up Minister has come out in support of strikes. What a fucking surreal nadir of the Labour movement we have got to, where literally only one Labour front bench member has actually said that they support this strike publicly. And it's being treated like a fucking bombshell moment. Oh, I can't believe Liz Andy's gone public with her support for the unions. You're the fucking Labour Party. You're the political wing of the union movement. It is literally your job to come out here and support the unions. And apparently it's this big fucking hullabaloo when one of them actually says, does their fucking job properly. What bizarro clown shoes world are we living in, where we expect members of the Labour Party not to come out in support of strikes? What is this? And she's right. She's absolutely 100% correct. Like, I have mixed opinions of Lisa Nandy, but at least she, if I can tell her, if I can agree on her with one thing, and that she is steadfast in her support for unionisation, having come up from the union movement herself. And as she said, she is on the side of both the public and workers of unions to prepare to stage major strike action on the rail network in the coming weeks. I mean, obviously, I think, is this the wrong article I'm reading here? No, this is the right article. I mean, she did say that they'll be best to try to avoid strikes, and I think that's true. I think it is absolutely true that you should want to avoid strikes. Do you know how you avoid strikes? Do you know how you avoid your fucking strikes? Pay your workers a fair wage. Don't raid their pensions. Don't cut jobs and reduce services that makes both lives for staff and members of the public worse. If you want to avoid strikes, that is the way that you do it. And it's the collective bargaining power of the union that can threaten strike action to make sure that we give these people the chance to avoid the strike action they engaged in. Unfortunately, TfL have not acquiesced to those demands, and so the action has to get taken. It's not a difficult set of prescriptions there. Commentators have noted that members of the Labour front bench have been conspicuously quiet on the issue. Funny that, as a commentator who has explicitly just commented on that 5 seconds ago. While the party leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has said he supports the general act of workers to withdraw the Labour, but believe the rail strike should not go ahead. These are contradictory positions, Keith. You cannot first say you support the general right and then say that they shouldn't go ahead. These are two contradictory opinions, Keith. What the fuck are you doing? We are the party of working people. Unless they want better paying conditions, then they can fuck off for being too radical. Literally, it's briefcase Labour in a fucking nutshell. And yeah, you're absolutely right, Ross. It's crazy that we actually were refreshed by Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell being explicitly pro-union. They shouldn't be refreshing, but it was, and I guess in a world of post-New Labour, heaven fucking forfend. And again, quite frankly, everyone should be going out and striking. Quite frankly, I've been in the TUC comments on TikTok calling for a general strike for fucking weeks now, because yeah, we should. If we can't be in a position where the government will take steps to ameliorate the issues of the cost of living crisis by, taking the energy companies into public control, or forcing Ofgem to not raise the price cap, or implementing rent controls to control the issues that we're engaging in. They won't do any of these things. So everyone should go out and fucking general strike. Fucking let's do it right now. There is no reason why we shouldn't engage in a general strike right now to fight for governmental policy that would make our lives better during the cost of living crisis. Because there are plenty of non-inflationary things the government could do to make these issues better. And one of those things that they could do is taking the energy companies into public control. It would be setting rent controls so people don't have to spend the fucking 40-50% of their wages propping up someone's investment portfolio. They could do that, but they won't, because it's not in the interest of the fucking big business gurus, big business leaders and CEOs who pay their fucking bills, as Nadine Dorries so eloquently pointed out to us on Monday evening, when she said that the worst thing would be if Boris Johnson goes, because then they'll lose their donor money that CEOs who pay their fucking bills to be able to campaign for their needs would withdraw funding if Boris Johnson was removed. Because when she literally fucking mask off. I mean, the pandemic's not over, but she's decided to go mask off anyway. God bless her soul. To come out and tell us that the only thing that they care about is the fucking money getting stuffed in their pockets by the fucking billionaire business moguls who they fight for the rights of, rather than ask the regular fucking people. And if you can't see that, I'm sorry, you person watching this video who hates unions, you've been propagandized to. You're a victim of propaganda. I mean, everyone can be victims of propaganda. That's true. We've been propagandized to by an incredibly, well-structured level of cultural hegemony that exists to continue to perpetuate the systems of capital that make your life worse and the lives of billionaires better. It's very, very simple. I'm sorry. Like, call me a class warrior, call me a fucking commie, pinko, leftist cuck if you want to, but it's the truth. And unfortunately, that cultural hegemony has gone so far that we now literally have the leader of the Labour Party, the spokesperson for the Labour movement, saying that people shouldn't go on strike. Brilliant. Brilliant. What a fucking, as I said, what a clown shoes country that we live in. Absolutely, anyway. But the GenSec of RMT went on Good Morning Britain to defend the strike plans. Apparently, during a passionate grilling on Good Morning Britain, he's called Mick Lynch. This guy's an absolute fucking giga chad. I'm going to put a giga chad of him on the thumbnail for this video when I eventually put it on YouTube. Let's have a little react and see what they had to say on here. I might have to flip this to make sure that I don't trigger content ID on YouTube. Let's go. Transform. Flip.
Because we're facing the biggest rail strike in more than 30 years on the 21st, 23rd and 25th of this month, June. We're joined by the General Secretary now of the union responsible, the RMT, and that's Mick Lynch, who was on the show a couple of weeks ago saying he was hoping to avoid this, but it looks like it's going to happen. Mr. Lynch, I'm just going to cut straight to a question from one of our viewers because it typifies much of the reaction we're getting this morning. This is somebody called Ragnar. He says, the RMT's plan is to cause misery. My son is a cancer surgeon in London. He won't be able to get in. They're now replanning and they'll be cancelling many operations. And then he says with bitter irony, well done, RMT union. I bet you're proud of yourselves. Well, he's watching.
That's TfL's fault. TfL could have reneged on the things that they were doing to avoid strike action. They have not, so strike action is inevitable. Very, very simple.
Right now, what would you say to him?
Well, we don't want to cause misery for anyone. We've got a cost of living crisis, which we've just been discussing, and our members are a part of that. They've been working through the pandemic. They've been keeping the transport services and the rail services going. They were lauded as heroes by Grant Shapps, their transport minister, during that period. And their reward for that has been a pay freeze that's gone on for 2 or 3 years. We've got into the 3rd anniversary without a pay increase for most of our members. We're faced with thousands of job cuts, and our terms and conditions are going to be ripped up in the form of fire and rehire that's done internally to the railway. So we completely regret the disruption. I understand the anger that the public will feel. I understand their concern at the disruption, but I also understand...
It's just a problem, right? It's a problem with the liberal mindset, where they think that every action is taken in a vacuum. They do not understand the material conditions that leads to radical action that demands change, right? For example, so obviously there is nothing wrong with union striking, and they absolutely should, right? The idea that strikes are bad is that's fucking lib shit regardless. But even things that are bad, like in a vacuum, liberals will think have happened in a vacuum and will not condemn the material conditions that led to them. For example, you look at the reaction to when Hassan said that America deserved 9/11. They thought that that was a lionization of the people who committed the terrorist attack, rather than a condemnation of the material conditions and the actions of the US State Department and the US government that led to the conditions that made 9/11 an inevitability. And in the same way that they do not see that the actions of TfL have led to the strike action at the moment that's happening also being an inevitability. It's the same principle, but unfortunately you can't engage on a material basis with any fucking liberal because they just don't understand it.
Understand the anger of our members and of working people in general about the way they're being ripped off by their employers and ripped off by the government.
OK, well, that's your answer to him and to many people who've made similar points. I suppose what they're all really saying is, or asking is, does the means justify the end? You, of course, have an absolute right to strike, and you have an absolute right to push hard for better pay and conditions and safety and all the rest of it. But you're actually holding the public to hostage. You're not really actually affecting your bosses. You're affecting ordinary men and women who won't be able to get to work, who won't be able to go on holiday. Also, there are so many events happening.
I mean, you definitely are affecting the bosses because there's going to be no revenue during the strike. that definitely affects the bosses.
That week, and I suspect that's why you've picked that week. There's Glastonbury, there's a huge Elton John concert, many other things, all of which are going to be severely disrupted.
Oh no! People aren't going to go see Elton John because of the rail strikes. Oh heaven! I'll cancel it. We're gonna cancel the whole thing. Elton John might have fewer people going to his concert. Oh, I guess I have to call off the whole workers' rights thing, the whole new jobs paying conditions, the whole new functionality of the London Underground, and the staff and the way in which they're going to have to engage in their job with post cuts and the rates and their pensions as well. Because if we do that, people might not go see Elton John at the time. Oh no! That's the biggest concern, is the patronage of Elton John. It really, really is.
And people's pleasure and enjoyment and functionality are going to be hit. You're basically holding the public to hostage. That's what's coming through.
We're not holding anyone to hostage. I don't follow Elton John's tour schedule or the comings and goings of Glastonbury. What we're faced with is the lack of a pay rise and the threat of compulsory redundancies across our industry. We're also facing the threat of cuts to the safety standards, because Network Rail are changing the safety regime to cut inspections, to make sure that they can cut 3,000 of our members' jobs who do those safety inspections every day and every night on the railway. Now, what you're asking us to do is just accept passively the destruction of our industry and the loss of jobs and the poverty of our members. What's happening in this country?
I don't think that's what
and that's why radical action had to be taken in the P&O situation as well, where they're literally doing fire and rehire, which is similar to what the London Underground and TfL are threatening to do here.
People are asking, sorry, with respect,
working people and the rich.
I think a lot of people have enormous sympathy with what you're saying and what your members are experiencing. But I think people would say, don't accept it passively, but please don't cause the misery that you're going to cause. I mean,
what else are they going to do? What other action were they going to take? Especially at the point where they've had negotiations, they've tried to stymie this previously. Do you think, again, as you rightly point out, Rosa, in chat, they don't just strike for no reason. They don't do it. It's not the first point of call for them. It clearly is the last resort, because TfL and LU are going ahead with the issues, the things that they've decided to do. Like, if they didn't go ahead with them, the strike wouldn't happen. It's not fucking rocket science.
Richard's already mentioned a huge number of events. Now, you might say, well, I don't follow tour dates, but these are businesses. These are huge events affecting thousands of people and businesses which are going to be put out. We've already talked about...
Oh, won't someone please think of the poor bourgeois? The bourgeois will not be able to have more profits because people won't be able to go to the events that are being... Oh no, what a shame. Call the whole thing off if you ask me.
Other things that are going to be affected, particularly hospitals, NHS, people going for important appointments. That week is also the final week of GCSE and A-level exams. You're going to stop pupils getting into schools. You're going to stop teachers getting into schools. You say you don't want to cause misery. You are causing misery. Is there not another way that...
Well, they don't want to cause misery. They don't want to do so, but they have been forced. The hand has been forced by the actions of TfL. Very, very simple.
Doesn't involve going on strike.
Well, I would love to find another way. We've been speaking to these...
negotiation.
Well, I know what negotiation is, Susanna, and I do it every day of the week, and I'll be doing it in this dispute, and we'll be seeking a settlement that our members can accept. We have been talking to these companies for 2 years about their programme. They have not put forward a single proposal that addresses the issues in this dispute. You are asking us to be passive in the face of aggression from our employers. They are seeking thousands of job cuts, and they and you seem to want us to just passively accept that. Where workers have done that over the last 20 or 30 years, they have been driven into minimum wage, they've been driven into having their conditions cut, they've been driven into the gig economy, insecure employment, flexible working hours as it's called, 0 hours contracts.
Well,
it's time now for workers to stand up for themselves and get a square deal from these companies and from society in general.
Well, I did open up...
Oh, it's so fucking based. Oh, God, I love it. Our trade union Gen X are just the absolute biggest gigachads in the world. My one is Dave Ward for the CW. He's also an absolute chad.
My question by saying that obviously you have every right to strike, and every worker has the right to strike. I'm just wondering if there is...
You just don't want us to exercise it, ever.
No, I don't want... I feel that I don't want misery for all the people who are going to suffer.
And I don't want my members to lose their wages.
What I wanted to put to you is this. Is there not a middle way? Rather than, as we accept your right to take industrial action, but can't you mitigate it a bit? What about a go slow? Why does it have to be a complete walkout? Why not take more moderate measures to make your point?
Because then the people who are forced to continue working are the people who need the strike the most, unfortunately. The people who work in, again, the customer service end, the people on the lowest pay in the London Underground, those would be the people who would have to continue working because the system wouldn't function. Obviously, you're going to have a reduced service. People are going to have access to that customer service level, the cleaners, the all the people who operate and do repairs, all that kind of stuff, the people who there's people who staff the platforms and what have you. These people are going to have to continue working at the same rates as they were previously. This is not just about train drivers, as much as many people on the internet seem to think it's just about train drivers, right? It's not. It's more than just that. It's a wide array of different people who are affected by this, and so the full walkout is just necessary.
Well, go-slows are illegal. The anti-trade union laws in this country make everything except overtime bans and strike action almost impossible to carry out. A go-slow would cause as much disruption, us opening the gates for passengers to travel for free so that the companies didn't get revenue, has been made illegal by continuous Tory governments.
Then why a 3-day strike? Why not a 1-day strike? I'm just trying to look at ways that you can mitigate the misery that you've already admitted you're going to cause, and it's real. We're not making it up. It's going to be horrible.
Because
why does it have to be a 3-day strike? Why can't it be a 1-day strike?
A 1-day strike would not cause the government and the companies to sit up and pay attention to our demands. And it would also make this go on for longer, possibly, all the way through the summer. We have to get the government to allow these companies to make proper offers. It's Rishi Sunak and Grant Shapps and Boris Johnson that are tying the hands of these employers so that they cannot make proper offers. They are enforcing austerity across the working class, and we're faced with enforced poverty of many thousands, if not millions, of working people across this economy. And it's time now that the British worker got a pay rise and got job security and decent conditions from corporate Britain, who are written off.
Why so based?
And
I think that argument has enormous support. That is not the argument, though, is it? It's the misery that is caused. And you've already said that your whole...
But it's already said that there is no choice. There is no alternative. The negotiations have happened. RMT has not been able to come to a deal with TFU because they refuse to negotiate in a manner with which is going to actually reverse the changes they are planning to make. So strike action is inevitable. And Mick Lynch is also 100% correct in that a 1-day strike would not cause them to take effect because, the 1-day strike, once it's over, they can just go back to maintaining the cuts and the pension rates they're intending on doing in the first place. You have to be able to use that as a bargaining chip in the negotiations, which means not having a specific end date, because that is what you use to make sure the people acquiesce to your demands as a union. It's not rocket science. Well, again, obviously Richard Madeley doesn't understand how work and negotiations work because he's never worked a fucking real job in his tiny little privileged life, has he?
Holding a 3-day strike in order to inflict the most pressure.
Well, I didn't say that at all. What we're seeking to is have effective industrial action.
You just said that a 1-day strike wouldn't...
But there's no point in having ineffective industrial action, is there, Susanna? It would be pointless.
Okay, but yes, 100%.
People look to a strong trade union to effectively represent them at the negotiating table. We will seek to do that, and if we can get a decent offer from these companies that addresses the issue, we will settle this dispute.
The other thing you're doing, Mick Lynch, is you're holding the strikes on alternate days, so it isn't just a 3-day strike, is it? It's basically a week of misery.
Well, we are holding effective industrial action. That is the job of the trade union, to make sure that they apply the pressure in an effective way. That's what we need to do to make the companies and the government pay attention to our demands.
Do you think there is a chance that because the threat is, as tough as you're clearly outlining, that, the point of it should be that it brings the employers back to the negotiating table in order that you call it off? Is that possible?
It's possible. We have waited 2 weeks since the ballot result to allow negotiations and discussions to happen. I've been at those negotiations myself. There has not been a single offer or even a mention of a concrete offer to address these issues. There's been a 2-year lead up to this, and we've still got a further 2 weeks before any action takes place. So we need to get around the table and have serious proposals that address the issues.
All right. Mick Lynch, thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lynch.
Oh, he's just 100% correct in every possible way. They just can't get it into their heads that unless TfL and the Underground come to the negotiating table, the strike action is pointless. And so engaging in anything other than a week's worth of strike action, it's not going to cut the mustard. Unless you, and as Mick Lynch quite rightly said, if it's not effective industrial action, then there'll be no point in doing it. More misery would be caused by engaging in industrial action that does not ameliorate the issue than by engaging in, industrial action that causes lots of disruption now that does eventually end the dispute. It's not rocket science, guys. It's really, really difficult. But then again, I would understand in that basically every single part of breakfast TV at this point, every single part of these kind of happy clappy current affairs nonsense shows that you see before 10 p.m. in the morning, these only ever exist to push a bourgeois narrative, and they always have. That has always been the viewpoint that ever gets taken by the people who are actually on the front benches. I mean, that's why Good Morning Britain was fronted by fucking Piers Morgan for so fucking long, right? And the fact that that Susanna Reid looks left-leaning in comparison to Piers just shows you like how far to the right all of these kind of happy talk shows actually, the plane of existence that they exist on. And yeah, it's an excellent performance there by Mick Lynch in defending the actions of the RMT and engaging in the strike that they have been doing. It's interesting, another clip here from Good Morning Britain when there was a debate where Ash Sarkar and guy from Talk TV, apparently this should be fun, also talking about it. Let's see what Ash Sarkar has to say, because she is always incredibly based with regards to these things.
People waking up this morning who will be saying we have this horrific cost of living squeeze. Fuel costs have gone up dramatically. Even yesterday, they've gone up the most they have in 17 years. Energy prices are soaring. The last thing we need is the threat of rail action, which means on those 3 days when I have to go to work, I can't use...
Oh, so there's a cost of living crisis, is there? It's almost like the cost of living crisis is also affecting people who work in the rail industry, and that's why they're trying to fix those issues by going on strike. What a surprise! What a novel idea!
Use my car because it's too expensive. I've got to go on the train, and now I can't do that either.
I'd actually flip it the other way around, all right? In a context where the cost of living crisis is being paid for by ordinary workers, the thing that you need are strong unions and the ability to collectively bargain for better pay and conditions. Now, why the RMT are striking, which is, I noticed, not something people have talked about, is that workers who had been keeping the railways running during the pandemic are being threatened with job cuts and a pay freeze, which would mean...
Yeah, like 2 years ago, it was key workers saving our economy and putting their lives on the front line to be able to keep the country running during a national crisis. And nowadays, it's all just, people who are holding the country to ransom by wanting their pensions not to be raided and their jobs not to be cut. Like, I'm sorry. Like, this is just, like, the perfect level to which all they got, right? All they got as thanks for the hard work during the pandemic was claps. Just clap, clap, clap. Oh, well done. Do you want a pay rise? No. Do you want better working conditions? No. But we'll have some claps. Can I pay my bills with claps? Oh, no, you can't. And now there's a cost of living crisis. Like, it's just 100% correct here. In that it is absolute nonsense. It's abject nonsense for them to speak to the unionised train service who were on the front line for the entirety of the pandemic and say, you can't fight for better pay even after 2 years of service during the pandemic as frontline workers.
That their pay isn't keeping up with inflation. And so that's why the union is doing their job and saying, we will use our strength, which is the fact that you can't run this without us, to protect and defend our workers' conditions. That is the job of a trade union. And if it's so important to keep the railway running, because I agree, these workers are totally essential, then the bosses should be coming up with a reasonable package that the workers can accept.
100%. Correct. Yeah, and she's kind of reiterating what I said previously, is that if people want to avoid the strikes, then come to an agreement with the union. Simple. If TfL and London Underground come to the negotiating table and agree changes today, very simple changes, no strikes. Strikes go away. You can just avoid them by coming to the negotiating table and acquiescing to the demands of the union. Incredibly simple. And unfortunately, inaction is seen as better than action as far as Liberals are concerned. Let's see what the response from this Christo person is.
You can have it both ways. I don't believe that you can say we must give in to the demands because these workers are essential. Oh, but they're not essential enough that we say that strikes among those workers shouldn't be allowed anymore, which is what I believe. Now, this industry, if we're talking about people who are having to pay their taxes to bear this cost of living crisis, this industry will receive £16 billion in subsidies this year alone. This industry received billions of pounds in subsidies, meaning that not one rail worker worked without full pay during the whole of COVID. Now, this industry in National Rail has seen over 10% drop in passengers. Here in London, on the Underground, nearly over a 25% drop in passengers. Now, can you think of any other industry that has subsidised its staff to billions over the course of COVID that has seen a fall in its custom that wouldn't reasonably say, well, actually, we need to now look at restructuring it and having some voluntary redundancies so that the business can survive? They're not asking for just the same pay and conditions. They want an 11%.
They want 11% pay rise because the inflation is coming up to 11%. You're absolutely right. The anti-union, anti-worker bullshit of Liberals and Conservatives is absolutely fucking nauseating. They just think that the people who literally keep this country functioning, as they did during the pandemic, right? People on which the whole entire backs of this country is held on, the working people of this country, they just think that it's all bootstraps rhetoric, isn't it? Is that you should be happy with what you've got because the meritocracy exists, and I believe in that so fervently. I believe so fervently in the existence of meritocracy that by default, you must be in your correct place in the meritocracy because that's just the just world fallacy in action as far as they're concerned. They can't see further than that. They can't see the structural issues. And the issue is that if these particular industries that are so integral to the functioning of society are stopping, their strikes do stop, then what will happen is that their pay won't go up because they won't be able to collectively bargain for their wages. They won't be able to collectively bargain for their conditions. The conditions will get worse. People will leave the profession, like it's happening in the NHS right now. The NHS is losing staff not just because of Brexit, but also because of the way in which it's been starved of money deliberately by the Conservatives. They are losing staff right now, okay, and they have and they've not striked at all. They've been so mild mannered to not go through all of it, not properly strike in the health sector when they really fucking should. Because obviously the issues that would happen by withdrawing their labour in such an even more vital sector of the economy, and it's gone. The health sector's gone to rack and ruin because of the lack of people to be able to staff this incredibly necessary part of the economy and part of society. So if you take the ability of these people to strike away from them, all you will leave with is a worse service that won't perform properly and will be entirely underfunded and entirely understaffed, and it will die, right? So these people have to be able to strike because if they don't, the actual service that gets done and the lives of the people who staff it will just get immeasurably worse. So much so that the system will cease to function. And that's what we're seeing now in plenty of industries where productivity isn't going up because people's pay isn't going up because union levels are so fucking low and people aren't getting paid enough to fucking care about the jobs that they do.
Pay rise.
Because that is the job of a trade union. And here's the thing, why I think it's so dangerous for you to talk about making strike action illegal. Every single person in this country has benefited from rights which have been secured by trade unions and the right to strike, including minimum wage, maternity pay, sick pay. These are all things which, before they were made law, were won by trade unions, and they benefited everybody. Because you're essentially selling a myth to the people of this country. You're saying, well, if you ask nicely, if you play nicely, if you're a good little boy or girl, maybe the bosses will take pity on you. That's not how it works. Workers have one form of power, and that is collective bargaining. And every right we have as workers in this country has been secured by playing hardball.
I'm sorry, but I'm afraid that they now abuse the right to strike.
Fuck off, mate. Go, like, you pull the other one, mate. It's got bells on, and she's absolutely correct. Like, literally, the life that we lead in this country was won by trade unions, won by the Labour movement, and the Labour Party, as it existed previously, as in the political wing, was able to agitate for those to be able to make them law. And it's embarrassing. It's completely fucking embarrassing that we have a leader of the so-called Labour Party at this point who won't unilaterally back strike action from the unions that he's paid to represent. It's an embarrassment.
Like the London Underground strikes, which was the same union, they announced that they were going on strike based on simply the plans of TfL. Now, I'm no huge fan of Transport for London, but based on just the announcement.
Yeah, the plans are why you'd go on strike. Say, we'll go on strike to make sure those plans don't come into effect. Is this guy fucking, like, did he get dropped on the head as a child or something? Is he that fucking stupid to not understand the function of a trade union?
Of some of TfL's plans before they'd even sat at the negotiating table. They said they were going on strike.
Your workers. That's called protecting your
strike
members.
should be the last resort, not the first resort. There was a strike a few years ago when someone on the underground was found to have been drunk on the job, and they found that they still wanted to go on strike to protect that worker. Now, what would be
Yes, based, 100% based. Let's fucking go. Let's protect all the alcos.
reasonable, if you really want to hit the bosses where it hurts, run a minimum level of service, as this government is proposing.
Again, it's just the liberal conservative action where they just think, and as Ash said, if you just play nicely, if you play softball, they won't completely eviscerate you. And it is their job. It is the job of bosses to eviscerate your rights. They have a duty. The system is predicated on them delivering value for their shareholders, right? So, it's not quite the case with TfL, but in the vast majority of cases, the literal existence of the boss is to make sure that he pays you as little as you possibly can, right? Or she, to pay you as little as possible, because company relies on minimizing wage expenditure to maximize profit as share dividends, because that's literally the fiduciary responsibility of the company. The entire system of capitalism, of shareholder capitalism, would collapse if companies just stopped doing that. They have no reason, and it's entirely contrary to all of their material interests, to want to play nicely with you. So you have to collectively bargain. You have to say, we will shut everything down unless you accede to the demands of the workers. Otherwise, they have no reason. They have no reason to play softly with you at all, and they are actively incentivized not to. It's just pointless. This is literally the action that should be taken. Yeah, we've had wage stagnation since 2010. We've had austerity implemented by the government, by people's lives being, their actual quality of life being turned down by what's happened with regards to all of the cuts that have happened to essential services and public sector cuts as well to, jobs that are essential. The money that's been cut from the health service, which has led to the denigration of the service over time, and it's a compounding issue because people will continue to leave the profession, and it will only get worse as money doesn't go into it enough that it should do. This is going to be a continuous issue, and that has, as you say, what will it take for them to actually get on board with the actions of striking workers, literal workhouses? Like, where does it fucking stop? I was very happy to see, to be fair, I was happy to see that Good Morning Britain did run a poll on this. I think I can find it here somewhere. They ran a poll on it. I think it was like a 4-to-1 ratio of people saying they supported the strikes, which is good. I mean, it's surprising, to say the least, considering the amount of propagandizing against the unions happens, right? But I'm very glad to see that the people in this country at least are switched on enough to understand that striking is a right, and bosses have been taking the piss for decades and decades and decades. Quite frankly, it's time that we took more collective action. And I'm very glad that my Gen Sec Dave Ward went on LBC and said, there should be a general strike at some point, because unless the government takes proper action, which it won't do because they're the Tories, but you can at least weaponise your power to get some concessions from them to make life better for working people during a cost of living crisis, then a general strike should be inevitable. And Mick Lynch was correct in saying that the unions are entirely hamstrung by the ways in which laws around trade unions do function. The strike action was completely inevitable, and he's an absolute chad for pointing that out in the first place. So yeah, that was. At the end of the day, strikes are based, unions are based. You should join a union, you should strike. There should be a general strike. Everyone should come down to London, 18th of June. Go to the Trade Unions Congress's website. All the details for the march on Westminster that's happening on the 18th of June in London. Be there or be cuboid or some other kind of, geometric metric in which that we can call you uncool for not turning up to the march. We're going to march on Westminster and demand a new deal for workers. You should be there. I'll be there too. I look forward to seeing you there. And if you're watching on YouTube, I should also shill for myself. You should first of all join a union. Spend the small amount to join a fucking union, right? If you've got any money left over, you can subscribe to me on Twitch. And then also, please like the video. Please leave a comment below. Please subscribe to the channel and click the bell to notify you when I go live, and will also notify you when I upload new videos on my channel. Thank you very much. Join a union, and I'll catch you next time.